And Lauren, guess who is joining the Los Angeles Clippers? It is James freaking Harden, the beard himself. The trade finally went down. The specifics essentially is Robert Covington, KJ Martin, Nicholas Batum, I believe Marcus Morris as well, a couple of first-round picks headed towards Philadelphia. And in return, the LA Clippers get PJ Tucker and James Harden. James Harden had his introductory press conference literally 20 minutes before we recorded this podcast, and he had some very interesting quotes about the whole situation, Lauren. It was, to say the least, spicy. It was spicy, okay? He said, I'm not a system player, I'm a system. So he's essentially saying, I was on a little bit of a leash in Philadelphia. Now, I want to read the full quote to you because it seemed like clearly the rift between him and Doc Rivers was a big issue for him last year. Obviously, the contractual issues, but I'll read the quote, okay? So a reporter asking, and how do you feel it's going to work here compared to how it worked in Philadelphia? And he said, I don't think when I'm in a leash, I'm not just shooting the basketball every time. I meant like, I think the game and I'm a creator on the court. You know what I mean? So if I got a voice where I can say, hey, coach, I see this. What do you think about this? Then it's like, okay, somebody that trusts me, that believes in me, that understands me, that I'm not a system player. I'm a system. You know what I mean? So somebody that can have that dialogue with me and understand and move forward and figure out and make adjustments on the fly throughout the course of the game. That's all I really care about. It's not about me scoring the basketball, scoring 34 points. I've done that already. So that's what I meant by that. Okay. So the full quote gives you a little bit more context, right? Because he's not saying, oh, give me the ball, get out my way.
Yeah. Right.
He's sort of alluding to the fact that Doc Rivers had a very rigid system in place, and he wasn't allowed to be a little bit more creative. And you know what? I actually think in that situation, James Harden is right. It's like, yes, James Harden he led the league in assists last year. He was a borderline all-star. He was a high usage player still last year. And ultimately, I do think that he did sacrifice a certain amount to fit into this system that Philadelphia was doing. The Sixers look good when he bought into that system. There's no question about that. But at the same time, I think what he's saying is like affording the luxury of being a little bit more malleable with your approach, a little bit more flexible with your adjustments. And what's the one thing we know about Doc Rivers and him not being good at? Adjustments, in-game adjustments specifically. So I do think, to be honest with you, that this was more of a Doc Rivers thing in terms of maybe him not wanting to be there as much. And obviously the contract extension and the contract situations kind of added on to that situation. So I don't know, man. I think there's a chance that this Clippers thing can work out much better than it did in Brooklyn and in Philadelphia. Now, to be fair, maybe it's the boy who cried wolf situation and I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt when I shouldn't be. Where do you sit on the whole, is this going to work in Los Angeles?
Oh, man. It's a very loaded question because I would say that this Clippers situation is probably the most, there are so many factors involved with this situation. There are so many moving parts. And I think it's more than these recent super, quote unquote, super teams that we've seen and these big time trios, because whether or not, however you categorize Russell Westbrook and where he fits into all of this, there's just a lot of dynamics going on here. And so as far as where it can work, I think it's one of those things that at the surface level feels like one too many cooks in the kitchen. And it's real easy to say that. But you also, on the flip side, look at how much time we've spent talking about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and how they just need to be available and then go from there and see what they can really put together when they're finally healthy. But if they can rely on a guy who is a quote unquote system, who can kind of make things happen himself, then the other players might be able to feed off of that, and it might just give them more flexibility. So I do definitely obviously need to see a little bit of it. I don't want to jump one way or the other, because the people that are saying this will never work, absolutely not. This is just, there are too many flaws that you can just see on day one. I hear what they're saying, and I don't think that you can completely just discount what they're saying because we haven't seen it, because we have seen James Harden in super team situations.
Sure.
So I think those statements are fair. But I think that this is a different situation, and him playing alongside these wings and in sort of a small ball system, I think that could be an interesting situation to surround him with, or those pieces to surround him with at this stage in his career. So I'm interested to see what it looks like. And I'm interested. I mean, we saw the Clippers be incredibly active at last year's trade deadline, trying to kind of maneuver and get those right pieces and slot those right pieces in. So I do think that there's a chance that we could see them do the same thing, kind of mix up the formula a little bit, and they might be able to put together a really solid group. So I don't want to count them out, but would I pick them as my favorite? Probably not. Too many questions.
Well, there are some betting places that are picking them as their favorite to come out of the West. And I mean, honestly, I wouldn't jump to that point yet. I agree with you. I think there are pros and cons to the situation. So there's a way this works, and then there's a way that this doesn't work, right? The way this doesn't work is James Harden comes in, commandeers the offense. We see less usage for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. The wing depth that they depleted in Robert Covington and Nick Batum and Marcus Morris, that becomes a more prevalent issue, even despite PJ Tucker being on the team. And we see this team wholly struggle when it comes to, crunch time situations, figuring out how that looks, et cetera, et cetera. The pro working out situation is that the Clippers offense, especially the half court offense, bogs down into a lot of isolation basketball. It bogs down into Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, who are not the best creators for others. I mean, they're adept, but they're no James Harden. And it makes it so that with James Harden, you now have an otherworldly type of creator who can not only get shots for himself, but get shots and easier shots for his teammates. And that's been evident throughout his entire career, regardless of the playoff performances, regardless of all that type of stuff. What is evident about James Harden is that he does make his teammates better. In that, there is no question. So that you can even have quotes from Tyrese Maxey and, PJ Tucker and all these guys of him saying, wow, like he opened the floor for us a lot more. And I think even Joel Embiid would speak to that fact right now. I ultimately think that this Clippers offense, I was watching their game last night against the Lakers, and this Clippers offense is dying for a creator like James Harden. They need that type of facilitator. It's just when the going gets tough for that team, they are trying to take and make way too many tough shots. And to be fair, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have made a career out of taking and making really difficult shots. But when it comes down to playoff basketball, when it comes down to executing at a really high level and potentially making a deep playoff run, you need easy shots. You need an offensive system. And as James Harden said, he is a system, I think there is a world in which this works. And
I agree.
I would lean to let's see how it looks, because I think James Harden is motivated. I think he clearly has to play very well because he's in a contract year.
Yep.
And ultimately, there's a lot of conversation about him. There's a lot of conversation about Kawhi Leonard. There's a lot of conversation about Paul George. Hell, there's even a lot of conversation about Russell Westbrook and Ty Lue. So I think all of these guys are super motivated to prove people wrong. And when you have that on a team, I think that's a powerful dynamic. All the drama and, chemistry issues and things be damned, I really do think that can galvanize a group in a major way. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you want to check out a full episode of the Objective Basketball Podcast, the link is in the description. We'll see you guys there.